Well, welcome back to Not Done. For some time, I've been wanting to have a human resources expert. And sitting down with me on today's show, Laura Fuentes, Chief Human Resources Officer at Hilton Worldwide. And now she's a structural engineer by training, not what you would expect per se, a McKinsey alum and a working mother of two, but the results speak for themselves. And this is one of the best conversations that we've had on the show to date. It's all about people, folks. So let's dive in. Well, welcome back to another episode of Not Done. I'm Sloan Dean, and today I've got Laura Fuentes, the EVP and Chief Human Resources Officer for Hilton Hotels Worldwide. And Laura oversees HR for nearly 500,000 team members across over 9,000 properties, 143 countries, 26 brands. And under her watch, Hilton has been named the world's best place to work by Fortune, and not just in the hotel industry, but in all industries. Quite a feat. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Hi, Sloan. So happy to be here.
Thank you. I'd be remiss if I didn't take a few minutes here in the beginning to talk about your journey, because I think it's quite compelling. And so you grew up in a diplomatic family. How did that shape how you see culture and belonging?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very international household. My dad was a diplomat for Spain. My mom is from Poland. They met in the UK, studying abroad. And I was born in Switzerland. So we were always moving about. Like my dad, every 3 to 4 years, new posts. So we'd pick up the family, move across country lines, new continents. I lived in Europe, in Northern Africa, in the US, back to Europe. Oftentimes changing schools. I remember when we lived in Tunisia, we were going to an American school, and my parents came home one day and said, you know what, kids, we've decided that next week you're starting at the French school. And my siblings and I were like, that's great, but we don't speak French. And they're like, you'll learn. So that has shaped both my love and appreciation for travel, for being immersed in different cultures, and just this adaptability to change and whatever may come your way. From an early age, too, I really noticed that hospitality, hotels, and GMs were cultural ambassadors. Like they were very much a part of the diplomatic life, and each country would have their own representation, but they would all come together at hotels. And so truly the GMs were like the superstars. And I think that sort of embedded a conscious and subconscious love of travel that years later, came to sort of stimulate my career choices.
There's a lot of amazing, either immigrant or grew up abroad leaders in this business. It almost gets in your blood, and you see other cultures experience different types of life, and it just makes you appreciate how beautiful this world is. You also then went and got a structural engineering degree from UVA, and then you got your master's at UT Austin. So you were literally building buildings, but then you walked away from that. What drove that decision?
I did grow up in the French educational system, and there's a lot of emphasis on science and math, and sort of naturally followed that path, and like the idea of architecture, building things, so civil engineering and structural engineering felt like a good path for me. But as I started the work, and literally steel-toed boots and a hard hat, I did realize that I was kind of craving some of the broader business perspective that my 6 years of engineering hadn't really allowed me an opportunity to dig into. Also, side note, realized I was kind of afraid of heights. So like climbing like scaffolding inspections on like high rises in New York.
Those exterior elevators are quite nerve-wracking.
Yeah, they can be, they can be. So I was like, I need a plan B to supplement my career here. And again, had a few like basic business gaps. So that's where like business school came in, and loved the broader perspective. I also realized I had been working at a British firm, Bureau Happold, a British design firm, and they were kind of a startup in the US when I graduated at UT. And I love that startup energy, the entrepreneurial spirit of the office, everyone doing a little bit of everything. And that, I think, started my love for dealing with people issues, like office stuff, like just rolling up your sleeves for whatever needs to get done, like pitches to potential clients. And that sort of helped broaden that perspective that business school helped solidify. After business school, I did what a lot of people do when they don't exactly know what they want to be when they grow up, which is consulting. But that, again, those were really good tools in my toolkit to help round out my business perspective. And to this day, the engineering mindset of take a big problem and break it down into smaller parts, build systems that can scale. All of that has come from my engineering days, so I would do it all over again.
Yeah, well, hearing you speak kind of brings back memories. I studied industrial and systems engineering at Georgia Tech, and I always say I think that kind of teaching you to problem solve and think about problems in a very comprehensive and exhaustive way makes a ton of sense. You then went to McKinsey, and I have to hit this point, and then we'll talk about Hilton. You were 3 months in when you had a baby, and you nearly quit, I believe is the case. And I'm curious, I read about the story where you said the staffing manager stopped you, and it feels like that moment had influence on your thinking and kind of your playbook.
So my first child was born 10 days before my Columbia Business School graduation. So I started working at McKinsey with a 3-month-old. I was able to actually walk and graduate 10 days after giving birth. So I'm pretty proud of that. But I started at McKinsey and I was excited for the work, the consulting strategy work. Got into actually a sort of design construction related client as my first client. But it was tough as a working mom. The hours were tough. The travel was semi-in-state, but that made it pretty hard as I, left Brooklyn to go outside of New York City. And so, 3 months in, sort of felt the burnout. Came home one day and my kid literally just didn't recognize me. And so that was a wake-up call. But what was really helpful was the next day I march in, and sort of was like, ready to quit. This isn't working for me. And the development manager at the time was like, you've done everything we've asked you to do, but you haven't stopped to think about what you need. So how about you give that some thought and then come back to us and try to make it work? And those words, like that advice, has shaped the rest of my career. It helped me, first of all, think about, what do I need? What is my true north? Do I want to quit? Like, I've spent all these years, educating myself and trying to have a career path that would be a good fit for me. So, no, I didn't really want to quit, but obviously, I also wanted to be a great mom. Like that, I had this sort of dual ambition. I didn't really want to give any of it up. And so, came back with a little plan to protect my boundaries and be home a couple nights a week. But doing the soul searching around what is it that I want? What is my true north? What does winning look like for me? And then defining boundaries and protecting them. Because I also realized it's not my boss's job to remember, oh, don't you need to go home to relieve the nanny? Like I would have to step up and protect that every single day in ways that still made me valuable to the team and allow me to get my work done. And so that, really helped me hone my communication skills, how I prioritize, how I get stuff done. And it was hard to do when you're junior and you have no leverage and you're just building your, place on the team. But that really helped me think through, how does this need to look like? And to this, that was 23 years ago. I've worked uninterruptedly. I had another kid at McKinsey, actually. And I was able to change careers, to travel, to do all these things because there's so many seasons in life. And being a working mom has defined, my career in the most important ways. But I'm so glad I had that wake-up call and that it happened at McKinsey and that I was able to stay, more years. It was really instrumental to everything that happened after.
I think a lot of people listening in often wonder, how do you balance things, right? They want to know, how does a CEO balance, okay, you have a family, you also maybe have some personal interests. And I think there's always trade-offs, and hearing you talk about that and exceptional. Well, fast forward, Hilton is the world's best place to work for the second in 3 years. That's magnificent, particularly given the scale that you guys have. How do you build the number one workplace in a sector where people are physically on their feet? It's 24/7. And frankly, in certain departments, housekeeping, food and beverage, those are very demanding jobs and sometimes not the best pay. How do you guys pull that off?
First of all, this didn't happen overnight, right? So becoming the world's best workplace and sort of achieving that milestone was years in the making. And I'll say the first thing is, our CEO, Chris, dreams big, right? And even having and verbalizing an ambition that might have seemed, 15, 20 years ago, outrageous, right? For us to be like, oh yeah, we see you, big tech firms at the top of these lists, and we deserve to be there and build the greatest culture on earth. So it starts with that sort of big dream and the belief that you can and should achieve that. Then years of a virtuous cycle, really built first on listening to our team members. And so we have our annual surveys, obviously building something that's going to work across the world for now over 500,000 people at the time is a task that really requires that scalability. And so our survey is like one core data point. We also want to compare ourselves against different industries, right? So we're not just looking at what does best in class look like in hospitality, but really thinking about, we don't want to just create a work experience. We want to create the best human experience at work. And so what does that require? And so today that's built on 4 core pillars: inclusion, wellness, growth, and purpose. And we ask ourselves, okay, Our team members, they want to first feel welcomed into our culture. That's inclusion. They want to feel like they're a part of something healthy. That's wellness. They want to achieve their potential. That's growth. And then importantly, they want to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. And so that becomes the purpose pillar. And tying all of that together with programs that will, at every step of the way, sort of meet them where they want to be met. You mentioned, obviously, the frontline team members. Like for us, our frontline are our bottom line. And I have spoken to a lot of CHROs, a lot of CEOs, and even the Great Place to Work Institute. And they would often ask us like, hey, how do you think about frontline? How do you incorporate them? And I'm like, frontline is first for us. Like we ask ourselves, like any program that we put out, how will we implement this at hotels? Like what need is it serving of our hotel team members? Our team members are on their feet a lot. One of our core programs was really thinking through the heart of house. What are their wardrobes? What are the shoes they're literally wearing? So really going beyond like the basics of course, we want to be competitive from a pay perspective, of benefits, but it's all those other things that really build that ecosystem of trust and of ultimately, you know, for those of your listeners who aren't familiar, the Great Place to Work rankings are based on surveys and our team members vote. When we put out a program that's based on team member feedback, we'll stamp it with, fueled by your feedback. So we really want to create this cycle of them feeling heard and listened to and taken care of at scale. And so that, years of doing that.
Well, everything you just said resonates and is needed more. A couple of things that I think really stood out to me as I listened to you is one, you said you guys wanted to just simply be the best regardless of industry. And I think so often, the hospitality industry compares ourselves to ourselves. Are we better than Marriott? Are we better than IHG? Is Remington better than Ambridge? And I think that sometimes limits growth. And the other thing that I thought that you called out really well, and I think about Jim Collins' book, Good to Great,
Yes.
that the enemy of greatness is being good enough. I can remember a conversation I had, a hotel owner, this is years and years ago, that said, I just want my hotel to be okay. I want to be in the middle of the brand rankings. I don't want to pay the most. I don't want to pay the least. It was kind of this race to mediocrity. And I very much disagree with that. And I think as I hear you talk, there is a direct correlation between your cultural rankings and your stock performance. You guys have performed exceptionally well. So what would you say to the critics or the skeptics that say, is that workplace investment really worth it? Is that what really drove the results?
Yeah. And listen, I agree with you, right? I mean, I think we're here on earth to do some goodness for the time that we have. Like, I want us to be the best, right? Like, I want us to have that ambition. It doesn't mean we're going to be perfect. Like, I'd never say, like, we've reached the finish line, we're done. Like, of course not. Like, we're humble enough to recognize that there's always going to be more to do. And in fact, the Great Place to Work CEO, I ask him every day, I'm like, why do you think we are? Like, what makes us different? He's like, you're never satisfied. You're always asking, like, what's next for your team members? What could we be doing better? What else are you hearing? And so there's a little bit of a competitive spirit there, but also truly, like, the environment our team members operate in evolves. Like, we want to continue delivering more and more. Look, the skeptics, I would say, and it's not really naysayers per se. I hold this bar for myself. I want to make sure that we're showing the ROI of what we're doing, right? So internally, but in our industry, as you know, for our owners, we want to make sure that we're being thoughtful stewards of their resources, of their investment in us. So any program that we put in place, I want to see, look, what is this going to drive as far as an engagement lift? How do we think this will impact turnover? How do we think this will impact mobility for our team members, their growth, their ability to serve and drive then the customer satisfaction scores, right? How will this drive, our innovation, productivity gains? So we're always trying to look at our HR core metrics, but ultimately the translation into the benefit for our owners and of course the benefits for our guests. And it stands to reason to think, right, that people who are taken care of will take better care of the people they serve, right? Our guests, our team members, we call it hospitality heroes. And these stories are brought to us by our guests. I'm a big believer in like the right inputs drive the right outputs. And for us, those inputs are taking care of our team members, paying attention to what they say and what they do. And then there's a very straightforward, frankly, correlation to, turnover drives reduction in costs, drives reinvestments in the business. A lower, turnover rate means higher retention, long-standing team members that our guests recognize and seek out by name, and ultimately that drives a better guest experience. Our turnover rates are roughly 30% globally. That's about half the industry average, and that translates translates into direct savings for our owners. So we've been able to show that and have the trust of our owners, our broader Hilton leadership team to really make these investments over time. And, it also pays dividends externally as we're recruiting, right? It's a tough labor market. There's a war for talent at all levels in corporate and at our hotels. And so when we are able to celebrate these rankings that are fueled by the experience our team members have, we're sought after as an employer of choice, and it makes recruiting a lot faster. So it's a virtuous cycle, but yeah, you do need to prove out those first cases, right? And that's why it takes time.
Now, nearly 2/3 of your hotel and corporate leadership positions have been filled by internal candidates. That kind of promote from within mentality, come for the job and stay for the career is what I always like to say. But if we pivot into kind of career pathing, if I'm a 22-year-old front office manager and I want to become a general manager,
Yeah.
how does one do that? What is that advice you give that 22-year-old listening in about, hey, I want to be a GM?
Yep.
How do I get there?
Well, first of all, I love hearing that. I was recently at our GM conference for Caribbean and Latin America, speaking to some of the team members there in the Dominican Republic. I was like, what do you want to do? What's your career goal? What's your biggest dream? And they're like, I want to be a GM. I'm like, I love hearing this. We talked to our elevator program, which is a top talent cohort that we intentionally rotate and develop across functions, and I want them to tell me they want to be a GM, they want to be a CEO, they want to be, an executive in corporate. Now, my responsibility is to make that happen and create the opportunities for that potential to flourish. And I want them to understand that the opportunities are there based on their passion, their interest, their skill, and the business need, right? So when you think about the matrix, the brands, the global, they need to understand all of that. If I were facing a 22-year-old who tells me this, I'd say a few things. One, take advantage of the things that we have at your disposal. Like, be a chief learning officer. Like, you're in the driver's seat of your career, right? So drive it. You've got platforms that are asynchronous where you can upskill yourself at the speed of your own curiosity. Hilton University, LinkedIn Learning, take advantage of all of that. Raise your hand. We will assign you mentors from the moment you onboard and join us. But tell us what you're interested in so we can have the right matches. Raise your hand for special projects. One of the core things that I love about our industry is this concept of task forces, where you can raise your hand, and if you're doing well, we'll take you for a special opening for a conference in another country, another city. So raise your hand early and often and offer to help for anything. Nothing is beneath us. And then, top talent is elevated differentially as well. So we are always scanning. My HR team, our leadership team, and we've got programs at every stage of a team member's career to take you from, our lead program. Lead 1 takes you from leading yourself to leading a team, to leading a function, to leading a geography, right? So we'll follow you there. We'll nominate people for top talent programs. Shine can take people from sort of director to GM in a couple of years for our top talent. I'd say drive your own thing. We've got a lot of self-paced learning opportunities. This is a land of opportunity, but you have to explore it. You have to differentiate yourself and, have the agency to do that and frankly have some fun doing it.
Recently had my good friend Pat Pacious, who runs Choice Hotels, on the show. I didn't know this. He said, hey, I'm actually an introvert. And he said the best career advice he ever got was you're never going to get an engraved invitation to speak up in a meeting, particularly when you're a younger, more junior person. And it's it's what you said. You have to be the CEO of your own career.
Yeah.
And that really, really is true. Now, you've got some great programs at Hilton. You've got Launch, a rotational program for early career talent. You referenced Hilton University, I think, with over 30,000 courses. You've got Guild for debt-free education, Better Up for coaching for first-time mentors. And you've got Mentor IQ for matching mentors. A lot of programs. How do you manage it all? And then if for frontline folks listening in, maybe they don't have a college degree, where do they start? How do you go about storytelling for the team members?
The storytelling is such an important part of the work, right? We really aim to have an intentional portfolio of programs and benefits. It's not just throwing stuff on the wall and seeing what sticks or a cacophony of noise, because that can be really hard for someone to navigate and curate.
Right.
But we do want to have a portfolio so that people can customize what matters for them, because we have such a diverse population. So the portfolio approach is intentional to allow people to customize. Storytelling, super important, and actually was one of the learnings on the Great Place to Work journey, because we realized Once we got on the list and we were hovering we were number 50, we were number 26, whatever. But like to get to the top, we kind of challenged ourselves. It's great to have these HR programs, but if people aren't aware of them and using them, like it's all for nothing, right? We, in partnership with our comms team, spent a lot of intentional time designing that storytelling strategy. I mentioned our heart of house. It really starts there. And we have a sort of hybrid approach, physical and analog and digital, right? So some of the storytelling, it's literally posters on the wall showing people like, hey, here are some learning programs. Here's our team member travel program, the recognition wall, making sure that it's sort of a surround sound communication so our team members know where to find things, but that it almost like hits them in the face everywhere they go. Of course, we have our lobby, our digital platform that all of our team members can access. We really try to have that blended approach. And when we tell the stories, we're not only showing like, hey, this is a great program. We want to really have human stories at the center of this, right? So that we can say, look, Sloan took this course and look what it allowed him to do. Look at his career trajectory. So we try to showcase not just the program, but the humans behind it, not just the success stories, but I'm increasingly interested in some of the vulnerability that comes with storytelling and also showing the paths, as you know, to take many twists and turns, right? And it's not just like hopping from success to success. So also showing the learnings, the failure resume along the way so that our team members can have the courage to raise their hand.
Have you read Unreasonable Hospitality
Yes.
by Wilgard? Yeah, some of what
Love
you were
that
saying
book.
made me think about that book.
The hot dog story is one I always remember in there. I feel like you and I should start a book club too. You've mentioned a couple of fun
Oh
books.
yeah, I'm a
Jim
voracious
Collins, by the way,
reader.
has a new one coming out. I don't know
Oh,
if you've
okay.
heard. Yeah, it's a good one.
No,
It's about like retirement and like how to think of like different
cool.
stages of career. So yeah, he's a good
Oh,
one.
very cool. Yeah, I love anything that's got to do with human psychology, behavioral
Same.
economics, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, so send it my way. Yeah, maybe I should start a book club as part of the pod. That might actually, Oprah did it. Why not me?
There you go. And you have a great following. And there are a lot of great books related to hospitality too. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you think about career pathing, I always found when I was running Remington that housekeeping, we just don't have enough housekeepers in the United States. We just don't. It's arguably the hardest to fill position, very labor intensive. You may have
yeah.
14, 15 rooms to clear that day. And I think career pathing is tough. Sometimes you have language barriers. How does a housekeeping attendant then go be a supervisor, an executive housekeeper, and maybe even GM? How is Hilton thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, we have thousands of housekeepers around the world. It is one of the most essential jobs, right? And we do recognize like many different backgrounds. A lot of the work that we put out is across multiple languages, so we're really sensitive to being able to reach them where they're at. And then, yeah, the trajectory is not dissimilar to any of our frontline jobs, right? Like making sure that the cohorts of teams are led by really thoughtful people who can identify coach performance and identify and cultivate potential, that we have the right flexibility in those jobs so that people don't burn out in those jobs, that they have the right recognition, that they take pride in the work, but that they're learning and upskilling as they stay and grow with us, if that is what they want to do. I have also worked alongside housekeepers who have been proud housekeepers for decades, and they've put their children through college because they've taken advantage of the career path, of the learning, of our employee stock purchase program. So I want to make sure that if that is someone's calling, that they are the very best at their job and that they're taken care of that. If they want to grow with us, that we cultivate and train our first-time people managers, that they have the right mentorship. One of our GMs across our Embassy Suites portfolio in the DC area has been with us for 20 years and started as a frontline cook. So we have so many examples of people across our frontline team member family that really start off in those jobs and then, get cultivated, developed, put through the right programs to achieve that managerial responsibility. And, that's what we're constantly trying to do and achieve.
That's great. Yeah. And I think that's where probably scale is a big benefit, right? Because you have to have the scale to have the opportunities. One of the things, having spent the last 20 years in hotels, and I think COVID exacerbated this point, that the industry has a bit of a perception problem. A lot of parents or American parents that want their kids to be an attorney or a doctor. Not a lot of folks hey, kids, go work in hotels. You even see this, I think, I think it's improving because of some of the dynamics with AI. And I always remind people, hey, we work where people vacation. Don't forget that. But you go to like the hospitality schools like Cornell, you saw a lot of the Cornell grads even wanting to just go work in Wall Street or private equity, asset management, and kind of the ops fell unfavor. You guys launched Every Job Makes the Stay, which is a recruitment campaign really aimed at changing that perception. I know I sat on the American Hotel and Lodging Association board for years and years with KJ, and I know AHLA is very focused on, hey, let's make the industry cool again.
Yes.
And it is. It's one of the few places you can really start as the dishwasher and become the CEO. Is that campaign working for you guys? And what is the reaction been? I'm curious.
Yeah, you're right. We have a perception problem that I think we're collectively working to improve. COVID was tough, right? Because
Right.
this was a moment in our industry's history where revenues went to zero. We all had to take some really tough actions
Oh, yeah, brutal.
with our workforce, and we did them in as empathetic and caring a way as possible, but still that leaves a mark. And we had to then really intentionally rebuild that trust and credibility with the workforce at large. So Every Job Makes the Stay was our intentional campaign to do that. And we wanted to really thoughtfully connect our guest experience with our team member experience and show folks that there are thousands of jobs in our ecosystem that frankly bring joy to the team members who hold those jobs, that there's a magic behind that, and also dispelling the myth that hotel jobs are just a one-hit wonder, or there's maybe like 2 or 3 jobs, but I don't see all these other arts that I can actually bring to bear in a career in hospitality. I mean, back to the words of our founder, we always say we're filling the earth with the light and warmth of hospitality, and our team members believe that credo, that mission, right? So they are the stars of the campaign. The results have been amazing. We've seen over 2 billion impressions for that campaign, so I think it really broke out in the noise of the sea of sameness of like employer, pitching their roles. So the storytelling worked. The results, we saw a 15% increase in application rates, which when you think about it, in our managed and corporate estate alone, we get over 3 million applicants a year. So 15% is a couple 100,000 people we might not have otherwise seen applying for our jobs. And importantly, it's given us a tool to also reach out when we go to universities, when we go talk, to campuses, when we go out into our recruiting across cities, that we're really showing the joy, the agency, and the career opportunity that comes with hospitality. So we're working on it. Obviously, it's a continued effort, but really doing our part. And it's interesting too, you mentioned what are parents telling their kids, where can you have a thriving career? And when I think about the pathways, the global opportunities, the opportunities across brands at a company like Hilton. If you're a GM at a Hampton, you're running like a small business. It can appeal to that gritty entrepreneurial nature. If you're running the GM of the Hilton in Midtown, you're running a small city, right? Like that is a huge asset. Like the business, financial, commercial savvy that you need to hone and exercise to run that hotel well is extraordinary. If you then take that career into, the Middle East, into, Asia, like you're becoming a global leader with cultural sensitivities, an ambassador for change in your communities at a time in the world where we see such a leadership gap. I've heard Ian Bremmer call it like the G0 environment because there's just no leadership. I'm like, hospitality is nurturing the leaders the world needs, like entrepreneurial, gritty, global citizens, driving change in their communities. So I'm like, who doesn't want to be a part of that? And so I think we have to show that more, emphatically and eloquently, and with the pride that should come with our industry.
100%. And I think also, hotels are physical places. As I've spoken to colleges, people have said, hey, how should I be thinking about my career over 20, 30 years now that AI is in
Yes.
the world? AI is going to replace the vast majority of computer engineers. Mm-hmm. It's already doing that in certain industries. And I think, not that you want to make a decision based off of fear, but AI is not going to impact hospitality in the same ways it is maybe other industries. And my hope is that it moves us back more towards a host experience, that some of the mundaneness that hotels get a bit bogged down in can be automated. The human experience is to go out. It's part of our DNA. And so I think that's what is exciting. Actually, my 13-year-old son wants to be a chef. And I've been leaning into that. I absolutely love it. he's one of his few friends. His friends all want to be gamers, and I'm so
He's the
proud.
smart one.
Yeah,
Yes.
we'll see if it keeps up. But I'm like, yes, yes, yes. I
No,
think
but you're so
culinary.
right. I think these analog craft-based careers will be enhanced by AI. So for your
That's
son, I
right.
think, leveraging AI to get creative with the menu design, wonderful, with discovering new ingredients for
Right.
his dishes and plates, amazing. To learn online, I met some of our team members in Saudi Arabia last year, and they were telling me how they learned to cook through like watching YouTube videos. So I
Right.
love that
Totally. My
aspect
son
of it.
too, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we are both AI enabled and AI proof in ways that other industries aren't. And
Right.
so we sort of bridge both worlds in a really interesting, we're the OG hybrid workforce, right?
I completely agree. I think this is a pivotal moment in travel where we can benefit. And speaking of people, I see announcements about, you guys having cutting edge benefits, and you've got care for all, elder care, children care, pet care, self care. As you're looking at benefits, I think that can be overwhelming for employers. How do you listen to your team members and make sure you're launching the right programs at the right time and scale? Because it can be overwhelming. And we are competing for other industries for talent. I can remember interviewing a few folks, and they were coming from tech, and they're like, well, I have unlimited vacation, which is
Yeah.
common in that industry, right? So how do you guys just make those decisions around benefit programs?
Listen to our team members, right? So we have this always on listening engine, our global team member survey, our great place to work surveys. We're always benchmarking across industries to understand like what is happening in the world, what are other companies offering, how do we remain not only competitive, but best in class in the things that matter to us. Over 10 years ago, we started the Thrive at Hilton platform, and we wanted our team members, the messaging was simple, like thrive in body, mind, and spirit. And we organized our programs underneath those. And then we adapt, right? So we adapt based on what is happening in the world. So COVID is a perfect example where we realized that it was a health crisis, but then also became a caregiving crisis, and it became a mental health crisis as people were stuck in their homes having to care for their children, their parents, their pets, the emotional toll that took. So in that moment, we launched that broader care for self and then eventually care for all platform because of what was happening in the moment. And we enhanced Thrive at Hilton with those benefits and those programs. Once we launch things, we're also measuring, like, is this working? Are we getting the ROI? Like, how does this resonate? And we get the usage data. We understand, like, is this having productivity gains? Are we getting attitudinal, improvements through their feedback? Is it driving retention, right? So we're constantly measuring that balanced scorecard of our programs collectively, but sometimes we can very individually see. So for example, our caregiving concierge Wealthy, we know that we have thousands of team members that have used that platform, and it's saved them tens of thousands of productivity hours because you're not doing the sort of administrivia associated with caregiving research. I will tell you, like, some of the programs that we build also can be born out of like one-on-one conversations. And that's why we tell our leaders, like, always be listening. We have one program that was born out of one conversation that is now global, but that I hope no one ever has to use. And it's our crisis concierge. And this was a conversation that I had with a team member a few years ago. Like, we were just coming off of a town hall. Chris and I were in Portugal, and a team member just asked to talk to me. And he was, longtime team member, had been with us and had gone through a horrific personal loss, losing a child under really tragic circumstances. And so he's telling me the story. He's showing me pictures of his family. And he had the courage and the authenticity to tell me, in that moment, Hilton supported me so well in so many ways, but you also fell short in a couple of ways. And I was like, please tell me what we could have done better. And that started a conversation that I eventually brought my benefits team in. It was helping with some of the travel that was required in this moment because team members in a crisis are just kind of frozen in their trauma.
Right.
So we now have a concierge who can help with those early moments where you're truly navigating the most painful experience of your life, and to be able to help them understand what's at their fingertips, how we can support them, etc. This team member helped us architect that. This is an example of a program that was born out of a conversation, not a survey, but that's part of our ecosystem. It's the macro and the micro, and just trying to meet our team members in the ways that we feel are most important.
That's phenomenal. I love that. Now, I am a bit jealous in that One of my favorite authors and favorite podcast is Adam Grant. And you partner with Adam Grant on the Work Life podcast, and you referenced Better Up research on numerical values around workplace friendships. How do you actually engineer friendship at scale?
Yeah, well, by the way, yeah, Adam he's been a great partner to us, and he and Better Up are actually working together with another author who I'm sure you
Oh,
love. I
cool.
love Brene Brown, and highly recommend her book. Strong Ground is amazing. But yeah, how do we engineer friendship at work? I mean, first of all, I think friendship is such a natural both input and byproduct of the hospitality industry.
My best friends I've all met working in hotels.
Yes, I know, right? And you see this time and again, and like the careers are typically long spanning. And so people kind of grow up together. And I see this every conference I go to, people who reunite, and it's just the joy of the community that we built. So I think it's a natural byproduct given the work that we do. So mentorship, for example, we have programs where we actually leverage AI to do matchmaking for hundreds of people across corporate and hotels and really bridge interests, careers, geographies, so that people can get to know one another and learn from one another. And those have borne lifelong relationships. We make the initial connection and spark, but then I love seeing people who frankly like never give up those mentorship relationships. We're great at celebrating and bringing people together physically. So our GM conferences, I mean, I'm sure you experience this too, our owners conferences, we want to create community across our ecosystem, across not only managed, but also franchise, like bringing people together. So we are a community builder. We've always believed in the in-person work as well. We're doing a big renovation at our corporate headquarters. And part of that is to have this joy of in-person and then allow that to transcend geographies. I mean, virtual friendship is lovely as well, as we're experiencing on this podcast. But we're big believers in relational strength in the network effect. At its core, it attracts people who believe in that.
Absolutely.
And people, right? I mean, our first value is hospitality. So that's just part of our DNA.
Thank you for being what I call market makers, particularly around culture and people orientation. I think that's much needed, and you're doing amazing work. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about AI. Chris told Yahoo Finance that when it comes to AI, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. Very
Yeah.
typical Chris
Yeah.
comment. Never shies away. Hilton has, I think, 41 AI use cases across the business. From your seat as the Chief Human Resources Officer, how do you think about AI, not only from a business perspective, but obviously impacting team members? Is this a tool that makes jobs better?
So look, as a business, certainly sort of aligned and identified, we think there's three core areas, right, where AI will impact our business at large. The first, the guest experience, and how can we make that a more frictionless experience for dreaming, to booking, to the stay, to post-stay. The second is through distribution, right, and how are we selling, sort of driving our product to our guests. And the last, of course, is everything that we'd call, with love, like back office efficiency, productivity gains. If you think about those three areas, it's going to be more than a workforce reduction tool, a workforce transformation tool, and an opportunity for us to rethink processes, to scale with the workforce that we have, to be more efficient on the administration heavy parts of our work that can more easily be truly automated and scaled. Like, what would this look like if I were starting from scratch? From an HR point of view, the first step, frankly, that I had to go through myself with the AI opportunity and journey is kind of move us away from AI anxiety to curiosity, fluency, agency. Because frankly, AI, even before I got to anxiety, I was probably AI annoyed. Because I was like, oh my God, if I hear about one more AI thing, this was like a year ago. And then my husband, who works in tech, was lovingly like, you know what, you just have to like. And so literally over the course of like a car ride, we were going away for the weekend, started listening to podcasts and like getting really into it, learning about it, using the LLMs, trying to understand their differences. Like every single day I'll be playing around with the LLM, trying to optimize something that I would have done intuitively myself, use it as a co-pilot, literally. And I've heard, other leaders say, like, AI isn't going to take your job, but somebody who's fluent in AI might. And so learn the tool. My kids, I've got kids in college, right out of college. I'm telling them, be smart about this, be curious, know what you're dealing with. And that's what we're trying to do at scale with our workforce too, through our learning modules, through our curriculum. through the right use cases. But this is a moment too where I feel like we have to be in our AI LOL era, which is the learning out loud, and making sure that you're not, people are afraid to say like, oh, I can suddenly do this so much faster through
Right.
AI, because they feel like that puts them in a vulnerable position or their job at risk. So I'm trying to learn out loud to say, hey, this is how I used it. I did this a lot better. This is how I'm using it for personal. So really learning out loud as leaders, I think, is really important in this moment too.
Yeah, I think that's all really well said. So first off, I actually use it for my advisory business as well as the podcast. I switched from Outlook to back to Gmail for my small business email because I have direct connectivity into Claude. So you can actually now directly connect Gmail, Slack, all this, and I have it basically do an end of the day readout to me. So
Very cool.
it adds, it's like my editor slash exec, my agent, and it gives me a productivity report every day, and it gives me a what's critical every morning. I also have found this Manus, Manus, really interesting to automate actual workflows. And the interesting thing that Manus does is a meta product. If you have to log into things like LinkedIn, it can access everything through a browser. I've done a ton of media over my career, and I wanted to aggregate it. I told Manus to go aggregate every public press I'd done for the last decade, and then take like the top 5 most compelling and log into my LinkedIn and put it on my page. And it did
That's
it in 5
cool.
minutes, and it would have probably taken me an hour.
I love that. I'm going to check it out.
I think your approach, I'm gonna steal that LOL, by the way. I took an MIT course this past fall. One of the things that stood out to me is the most compelling presentations were by the PhD students living it, because the curriculum that they used was like 3 months old and it was already outdated. So as you're thinking about updating Hilton
Yes.
University for AI literacy, things are changing by the week. How do you balance that? Because you're right, you want people to learn out loud, and you're being open about it, but the speed is what I struggle with, how fast it is. How do you think
Yeah, it
about
really
that?
is, can be overwhelming, right? So we've just launched within Hilton University an enterprise-wide curriculum. We've called it Momentum, and we've built pillars that are really catering to different levels of fluency, right? Our team is then really doubling down with our functions to think through, like, does our sales team need more specific training on how to cultivate leads in the market by region? Let's have a workshop on how to do that with AI. So then helping people, depending on their job, find the right forums, the right lunch and learns. We're also encouraging leaders to embed this into their own rituals, right? So I'll give you an example. We had a HR, and I also oversee our supply chain team, AI forum. And we invited people to come show us their top use case, like something they've done. We gave each person a 3-minute slot to present what they've done, how they've used it, how they built their agent, and 3 minutes for Q&A. It was the most fun hour that I've had in a long time.
I would have
Because
loved to have been a fly on that wall. That sounds
it
amazing.
was so cool. And honestly, like, these are team members who have taken upon themselves to build agents at their hotels, in our corporate office, really thinking through like how to make their lives easier. And we're sharing it, with a sense of pride and curiosity and leadership. So elevating those examples, and then the people around us get to learn that. I'm going to include those use cases in my next communication. So really driving this like scale-based learning culture, focused more on rewarding curiosity and experimentation, not coming at AI with a sense of fear or replacement. It's not a zero-sum game if done right, is my core belief. But we have to encourage that. We've got to show some of the vulnerabilities, celebrate the people who are, out there and like doing really cool things. Our head of talent and learning, really trying to balance, what are we building? What are we buying? How do we just learn in a community atmosphere? We have ongoing conversations with all the tech firms so that we can really piggyback on their efforts. This is continuous learning.
Yeah. Well, you're a reader. I'm reading this book that a friend of mine who's in tech recommends. It's called Vibe Coding. It's got some interesting takeaways. It's kind of industry agnostic. Anybody listening in, check it out. Well, I want to be respectful of time. I know we've come to the top of the hour. I always love to close out with a little bit of rapid fire with my guests. No right or wrong answer. I'll put you on the spot with the first one in that. Hopefully I don't get you in trouble. Because everybody wants them to pick their hotel. Best Hilton property you've ever stayed in.
You know that's impossible to answer.
I know.
I know, but no, I am willing to answer. So I'll say two I hold really near and dear to my heart are the Graduate and the Hampton Inn in Charlottesville, because every time I'm there, I know I'm going to see one of my kids
Ah,
soon.
okay, cool. That's cool.
And I'm heading soon. I'm going to give a shout out to our properties in the Middle East right now. I had the good fortune to visit Saudi Arabia last year and saw some amazing properties in our religious markets in Riyadh and Jeddah. So big shout out there. And I'm heading to Mexico in a couple of weeks, and I'm excited to see our GMs there.
Best career advice you've ever received?
Chris, who, I have the great honor of working for, just gives me always the best advice. And he's given me advice to be patient in my career, to dream big in my career, to take risks in a thoughtful way. So honestly, anything Chris tells me to do, I take that to heart, and I'll take that to the bank. But some great advice from him.
He's got a lot of good quotables. I've quoted him a few times. I asked this because we all make mistakes, and I think it is the mistakes that we learn the most from. So, worst HR decision that you can talk about that you've made, and what did you learn from it?
So many mistakes have been made in my career, for sure. I'll tell you one. During COVID, we were working really intensely on some really difficult decisions, right, relative to our workforce. And we were doing it all virtually with the broader HR team. I wanted to take a lot of care in those decisions and be really thoughtful about it. But we were also operating in a macro environment that was super stressful, right? There was a lot happening from a social justice perspective in the US in particular. And I kind of realized one day as I worked through the week, I got to the weekend, I started watching the news, and I realized I had kind of blown right past all of that, acknowledging any of that, pain and stress that my HR leaders might have been experiencing, and that I hadn't really shown up as an empathetic leader, really self-aware of what was happening in the world or what people might be experiencing, or creating a safe space to acknowledge that. And so I went back and I actually called a couple of my leaders and apologized for that, and had a good heart to heart, and set the tone the following week with hey, let's hold a moment for how's everyone doing right now? And that taught me that it's never too late to apologize, never too late to make it right, and to just be a human.
I think that's really a great example. How empathy and high results are not mutually exclusive.
Yes.
That, taking the time to give somebody the why, taking the time to ask how you are, doesn't mean you're weak, and you can still get really high results.
Yeah.
What's the single biggest misconception you think that exists about working in hospitality?
That we don't have every career path imaginable within hospitality, and you'll do some of the most meaningful work of your career in our industry.
That's really good. I love that. If you could have dinner with any business leader that you've never met, who would it be and why?
So I think it would be our founder. I've heard Chris say this, our CEO, but I'd love to have dinner with Conrad Hilton and just, ask him, did this play out like you imagined it? What were you thinking 100 plus years ago? I think that'd be a fun one.
That would be very, very cool. All right. I ask every guest, what are you not done with? So, Laura, what are you not done with?
I am not done with learning and giving back, and I don't think I ever will be.
Well, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it, and great conversation.
Sloan, thank you so much. This was so much fun. Thank you.